Computer.
Hey everybody, we are here. This is Intentional Schools, and we are here today to talk about the power of storytelling in education. And so normally we would start by giving a rundown of who everybody is here, but we're going to let everybody introduce themselves by telling a story today. So I'll get us started. I am Julie Bryant. I am the director of Intentional Schools. And I have kind of an interesting path on how I got here. I didn't go to school to become the director of Intentional Schools, but when I was in college, I was going to Vanderbilt University as an undergrad, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I was really interested in people. I was really interested in psych. And so I thought, hey, I'm going to be a psych major. So I was a cognitive studies major and a child studies double major because I thought, hey, I want to work with people. I want to be a good mom. This would be a great double major. So that's how I picked those. And I did not know exactly what I wanted to do with that. So I was there on scholarship and I did work study, and I started out with a couple of random jobs. I worked at a research lab on botulism, chemistry lab for a while, and realized that was not where I wanted to live in a lab, autoclaving beakers and all sorts of things, not interested in that. And then I actually worked for an archaeologist for a little while. It was an archaeology professor who spent most of his time in South America, but I was transcribing his memoirs about his time in the jungle and organizing artifacts in his office. And that was also, while kind of interesting and led to some crazy stories. I used to joke that I worked for Indiana Jones, but like a dysfunctional Indiana Jones. But I did not want to work for him forever. And I ended up finding a random work study job at a research project in the Department of Special Ed. And my job was to watch videos of the researchers teaching kids with language delays. And so the project, they had the researchers would do a language intervention with these toddlers and preschoolers, and then all through play, and they would record it. And I would type everything that was said, and then I would code it for like what types of utterances, how many words, silly things like that. But I watched hundreds of hours of videos of researchers working with these kids, and which was really fun because kids are hilarious. But also part of that project was half the kids were just working with the researchers, and half of the kids were getting the intervention from the researchers, but the researcher would do the session and coach the parent. The parent would be there with them, and they would coach the parent through, this is what I'm doing, and explain the intervention as they went. And then they would have the parent try. And it was just so powerful because I watched hundreds of hours of these videos of hilarious kids doing silly things and playing and having fun and learning to talk. And it was just really powerful to see, oh my goodness, these, not only are they teaching these kids and they're learning amazing things and they're able to talk to their moms and dads and play in different ways, but to see the parents be able to learn that and be empowered was just really powerful. And I thought, oh man, this is what I want to do. So I ended up going to my boss and I said, hey, I was a senior, and I was like, I really want to apply to be in your program, because she worked a ton with master's level students. And so I ended up applying and stayed on. I worked for her for many years. Amazing woman, and did powerful work. But it was just so cool to be able to see that aspect of it, not just teaching the kids, but teaching the people that are with the kids all the time. Because those kids made drastic improvements, and kids that came in with hardly any language. These were not just late talkers. They had 10 words or less, like hardly anything. And just to see the change that it made in those families was really powerful. So I ended up sticking around and got my master's in special ed, early childhood special ed, and then in behavioral analysis. But my favorite thing is coaching people who work with kids all the time, because I can only make a difference if I'm working with a kid for 2 hours a day, I can only make this much difference. But if I'm helping the people who are with the kids for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, that's where the magic happens. So kind of amazing and kind of cool, because now I'm doing this in this context. It's still coaching, but that's where my heart is, and helping people help kids. So yeah.
It's beautiful.
Awesome.
All right. Jim, you want to tell us your story?
Julie, I'm a little verklempt after that. If everyone could just have some coffee and talk for a minute while we gather ourselves. That was an awesome introduction. Tough to follow. Yeah, wow. I am Jim Walter. I'm a consultant. I'm also a public school superintendent and widely recognized as the eye candy of intentional schools. So thank you for having me. And I don't know why you guys are laughing, but thank you for having me. Gal, I feel like education and eventually intentional schools is just part of our destiny. If you don't know, Jackie and I are related. I'm definitely the top 50% of the children in the family, but Jackie turned out all right, and she'll tell you her story. Gosh, I think our story, or my story, really starts with our parents and their link to education. My dad was a struggling reader, did not like school. He's told me before he probably would have quit school without friends to help him get through, and playing sports, and a couple of influential teachers. My mom grew up in a single parent household, and that parent was an alcoholic, and she had to lean on teachers a great deal. And both of them ended up serving schools. My dad on the school board for 18 years. And he still mentors me to this day. He'll come visit once a week and tell me the things I'm doing well and the things I need to improve on. But it's fantastic because he cares very, very deeply about the schools and community, still at 75. And my mom became the longest active leader of the longest active huddle of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes in high schools in Michigan for 30 years. A huddle that's lasted 53 years now, trying to grow young people and grow their faith as well through sports and the public schools. So 100% blessed, destined. Our parents really valued school, teachers, coaches. Even when things didn't go well for me, they would listen to our complaints, but never talk down about a teacher or coach. If they ever thought it, we never knew it, to this day. And that says a great deal about the value they saw in the community and the education system. And I had wonderful experiences. The selfish part of me really, really believed I would be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys by now. And I came close with a horrible high school varsity coaching record of 4-26 over 3 years, but I had the chance, and that's really what matters. And from there, of course, when you're involved in coaching and teaching, leadership is, for some of us, a reasonably natural next step. And all that really matters, Julie said it well, and I'm sure Seb and Jackie will say much the same, but is trying to develop the leadership qualities within others. It's there, and help bring it out and help it flourish, whether it's adults or young people. And that's why I'm with Intentional Schools and this illustrious team.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Well said. And I'll go next. Is that okay, Julie?
Go for it.
I feel like he stole everything that I was going to say. So, no, Jim really connected with how our parents raised us to value education and to honor educators, all levels of educators. Another part of our story is I'm Jackie Montroy, Jim's sister, and a consultant with Intentional Schools, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And I went to college and then grad school to be a school social worker. which I did for 17 years, and I loved it, loved every second. But I came there by way of a trauma that happened in our childhood. Our middle sister, passed away very suddenly when we were young. And we lived in a very small town, and it was a beautiful village to grow up in. And it was in the 80s, and counseling just wasn't a thing. It just wasn't a thing. And so we grew up in the church as well. So we had like a flood of people from the church, like just loving on us. But it was just a traumatic loss. And we didn't have professional people to talk to us about it. And somehow along the way, I decided that that was unacceptable, and that I was going to be someone for kids to talk to about hard things in their life. And so by the time I graduated high school, I knew that was what I was going to do. I didn't know it was going to be in the school setting. I knew it was going to be some type of counseling. But then I've always had this big justice and advocacy side to my heart too. So social work just kind of fell right in line with that. So I ended up getting my master's in social work and being a school social worker, and I loved it. I also had a little bit of a savior complex for my first several years. I had to learn that our role is much like a coach. Our role is to help students understand their emotions. And like you said, Julie, earlier when we were offline, about sitting in and riding the wave of your emotions, but not letting it dictate your life. And so I really had to learn how to coach kids with that, and the leadership possibilities in working with coworkers and admin along the way in the school system just led me to believe how important understanding emotions, being able to communicate them, and especially like have hard conversations and assuming the best in each other. Those were like key components that helped me throughout my career and kind of led me to be involved in intentional schools. The value in having like understanding the story that everyone is bringing with them when they're making decisions, working with students, giving them the most generous interpretation of their actions. All of those things are things we do through intentional schools now. And it's just been a really good fit for us. Yeah, so I know it's kind of a hard story to tell, but I think that describes when people hear that part of my story, they kind of get me. And so it's important to tell. And I think it honors our sister and our family too.
That's awesome.
Seb, how are you going to follow that?
I think we'll end.
No pressure. Actually, I love your story, so I hope you're going to lead with what I want you to lead with.
I don't know. I followed a girl, and that's how I ended up. I'll go back a little ways. I think my story started born in a different country, right? So I was born in Romania. And so when your parents come here with $3 and don't know English, and you don't either, and you're kind of thrown in the American education system, and you're trying to learn math or English on the whiteboard in the middle of the classroom, but you don't even understand the language, was something that was very, very telling and difficult. And because I remember those days like it was yesterday, right? And so all the supports that are put in place today in education, which is so awesome in so many ways, a lot of them did not exist, right? 35 years ago or whatever it was, right? So however, all of those challenges did shape a lot of who I am today. So the only reason I could fit in school was because I could pick up a ball at recess and I was just as good or better than you. And that was the only reason I fit in, you know? And so here's a kid wearing mismatched colors, not matching, no Jordans or Nikes or whatever, right? Getting made fun of. But once you had picked up the ball, you earned respect immediately, right? And so what that kind of fast forward that to, you know, growing up in a community, there was three key pieces that I remember our family growing up, you know, when your mom and dad worked 2-3 jobs literally, right? And so community helped us like crazy. We couldn't have got what we got, whether it be material things or support, if it wasn't for the community that we kind of migrated to, because a bunch of Romanians migrated to that same community back in the day, right? And so and then everything was relationship driven, right? So if it wasn't, you know, it was, your neighbors weren't ignoring you, they were actually trying to help you, you know, and the willingness to engage with you. So here's a family who doesn't really know English, who's just trying to make ends meet, trying to find a couch or a TV here or there. And I'm not trying to make this a sadder story or one up anybody, but this, I'm just telling the reality, right? And so and then you know, your neighbors are, their willingness to engage and actually put effort with you, to throw a, you know, a women's party or whatever for my mom, who didn't even know what that meant, like, you know, but she shows up and it's just overwhelming with used clothes or this or that. It was all given, you know, that type of, you know, neighborhood and community and relationships. So those were key ingredients that I really took from my childhood. And fast forward today, then I went to, well, I should say fast forward, then I went to college. I actually quit college a couple times. Yeah, so I quit college a couple times. And the reason why, when I sit back and I think about it, I don't blame my parents for that at all, because education was not valued in our home, not because they didn't value it, but because that was not the priority, right? It wasn't a necessity. It was, how are we going to pay the bills and this and that, right? All of that other stuff. So, but as my parents started to do a little more well, you know, in terms of jobs and money, make a little more here or there, you know, I started to kind of think about what I wanted to do, right? And so it took me later in my 20s to actually figure out, like, so I worked about 20 jobs or so before I actually figured it out. Some jobs were really cool actually, but they were not jobs that I wanted for the rest of my life, right? And so, you know, kind of fast forward, then I went to college, and I ended up getting my master's degree. So I also was a school social worker like Jackie, 18 years, so around the same as Jackie. And I did meet a girl. That was not a joke. I did meet a girl. And, you know, as I started to take the same classes with this girl, I started to get involved more in group work and community, all the teamwork, all the stuff that social work provided through the education. And I started to realize, oh my gosh, a lot of this is kind of how I grew up or how I was supported or helped or this, right? And I was like, oh my goodness, this is like home to me. This idea, these conversations, the feel, the support. I just felt like overwhelmed with like, wow, this is my childhood all over again, you know? And so in a different way. But so anyway, I took to it and became a school social worker. And you know, the one thing that I really seeked when I became a school social worker was I loved to work with diverse populations and communities. And I think that's because that's where I grew up. Right. And so I was seeking those buildings as I was seeking jobs and stuff like that. And so kind of what brings me, you know, here to today, all these values that we've learned throughout our childhood, whether it be our parents, our siblings, our coaches, our teachers, whoever, all of these values, a part of all those things are still a part of me today. And I got to be honest with you guys, when people say, don't forget where you came from, I truly do not forget that. Like, I really make a conscious effort to never forget that. And there's times where I will even put on my whiteboard or sticky note some phrase, some line to remind me. where I grew up and how I grew up, just to not to take life so serious and all the things we complain about all the time, right? So anyway, that's kind of my story, and I'm with Intentional Schools, and I hope to bring all those values and skills and working with future teams. So
That's awesome.
Good stuff.
Powerful.
I gotta say, I know all of these people. I've been working with them for a while. I had not heard those versions of all of those stories before. And this is just the power of storytelling in action. I feel like I know each of you better. So thank you for sharing your history and your heart. I feel like I understand you all better now, which is I mean, not like I didn't understand you before, but I don't know, it's a different level when you hear somebody tell their own story like that.
Mhm.
Thank you, each of you. Storytelling, and this is, we said this is what this whole webinar is about today. There's a quote, it says, storytelling is a human art form that teaches about the human experience. And storytelling is one of the oldest art forms we have. I mean, it's as old as art and song. I mean, for generations and hundreds of years, there was no written word, and stories were told and retold and passed on, because it's powerful. It's part of who we are as humans, is our ability to take information and form stories into something cohesive. And I also found another really good quote by he's a researcher, Dr. Dan McAdams at Northwestern. I wanted your input on this, guys. He says, stories allow us to make sense out of otherwise puzzling or random events. Stories help us smooth out some of the decisions we have made and create something that is meaningful and sensible out of the chaos of our lives. How does that sit with you all?
I think it definitely hits home. The making sense out of chaos. I just think even when I look at therapy, how we help clients make sense of the decisions they've made, and having an outside person who's listening to your story connect the dots that when we're in the middle of it, we can't see to connect ourselves. I think that quote encompasses so much.
Yeah, I agree, Jackie. And there's bits and pieces where I was listening to Julie, Jim, and you, Jackie, in your stories, and there's bits and pieces that storytelling is so powerful because it just engages me so much quicker, and I make a human connection with each of you on part of your story here or there, or it triggers my mind to remember something about myself because of what you said, that was so authentic and honest about you personally, right? And so people are drawn to that. That's what people want, right? That's where people really, start to tell themselves stories about other people. He or she is fake or this or that. No, but I mean, these are the stories that we really, really love to hear from others, so we can make a personal connection and quickly. Julie, you said the best. Gosh, I know so much more about you guys in the last 10 minutes. And that's so true, right? Because we never really sat down and told this story maybe about ourselves, but look how much you can learn off of somebody based off one question. Tell me your story, Jim. You know what I mean? You can learn so much in 3 minutes, right? It's a matter of taking the time to do it.
Yeah, and stories, they can be really demographic proof. So they can cross any bridge. They can be easy to remember. You guys said it using different words. They're inspiring. They're contagious. It's really contextually a far better way to learn. Just the fact, we could share the facts. We could share those on paper. And it's not as if they don't matter, but the stories connect us. You all said it far better than I could.
So well said. And so thinking about taking stories into schools, we've talked about this a little bit offline, but how does this fit? I mean, we shared with each other, and there's this individual component of telling your own story or even thinking about your own story. But when you're working in a classroom with kids or you're working on a team with other educators, how does storytelling fit into that?
Yeah, so I'll just speak from a support role as a school social worker, or whether it be a counselor, psychologist, speech and language, what the roles are on and on, right? So I would just speak from that standpoint. There are times within a school that you literally have X amount of seconds or minutes to connect with another human being. Doesn't matter if they're 14 or 10 or 18, whatever, right? You literally have sometimes minutes to connect with another human being. And I gotta say, just by practice, after 18 years, I usually tend to, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I got X amount of seconds or minutes here to make a solid connection, somehow, some way, grab a hook of my own to draw this kid in order for me to get to the end result that we're trying to get to. And more times than not, I'm grabbing a hook from my personal life. Maybe not something that's super, super deep, but something that I know that might hook a kid in. It's not a lie, it's authentic, but it's something that has to, in order to sometimes help kids, it's very hard for a student to walk in your office and meet a stranger for the first time and just be vomit in the mouth of what they want to talk about. Sometimes it happens, but sometimes it doesn't. And you need something to grab authenticity from. And that's when I revert to my personal stories or connections that I will then share, if that makes sense, right?
Excellent.
Yeah, all stories help us understand each other. And I guess I would say it's important that we relay our stories to each other, because along with understanding, it helps us avoid judgment.
Yes.
Stories give us time and perspective to step into another person's shoes. We still have to actively take that step, but stories present the opportunity for me to be in each of your shoes, at least for a little while.
Mhm.
And that goes, Seb said it well, kids, adults, schools, you're surrounded by a bunch of humans, and getting into their shoes is pivotal. And again, stories are the gateway.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I was thinking about as you were explaining that, Jim, is you're making that me versus them, me versus you to us. You are making that transition through a story. It's an invitation to move it from individuals to us. This is something that we can all relate to. And that's a powerful, powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Yeah,
I was just gonna recommend a Ted Lasso clip. If you want to Google the clip of him playing darts. Yes, where he borrows a quote from Walt Whitman that says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I think that just goes hand in hand with storytelling. Like, you hear someone's story, be curious about it instead of automatically judgmental.
That's so good. Love Ted Lasso.
Yeah, me too.
So many applications. So it's taking this from a team level or a classroom level to a school level. How does this play into, as if you're thinking about your school as an organization and telling your school story, what role does that play? Does storytelling play in that and communicating?
I think it's pivotal. Having been a superintendent for a while, it's pivotal that you're telling your school's story. If you don't tell it, someone else will tell it for you, and it won't be nearly as flattering. And so it's important to help other people see the good things, especially in education. We're easy fodder for critics because everybody's been to school and everybody knows better. That's just part of the landscape. But by telling our story, we reshape that narrative a little to all of the wonderful things, all the relationships that happen. Yes, some of the difficult things we have to deal with. And if you're going to be a storyteller in schools or for schools, you have to wear the hat of responsibility. So the things that go wrong, you have to own. But again, if you're out front of them, a whole lot of humans want you to have the benefit of the doubt and just want you to succeed with their most precious cargo. We're going to have critics, but most people, just like coaching, 90% of the people just want to see you do a good job with their kids. 10% are loud and can ruin it. The 90% are often too quiet. But if we continue to tell the good things that happen, I think it changes our audience to some degree. There's certainly more than one way to do it, but I would just emphasize, you better be that storyteller or someone else will tell it for you. It doesn't mean bad things don't happen. They do. Unfortunate things. We get our foot in our mouth with humor, or we may have hurt someone with an action, but those things can be repaired. It's what humans do, and storytelling is a big part of it.
I think that oh, go ahead.
I'm not going to follow up with that. I think Jim said it very, very well.
One thing I was thinking of with that too, Jim, is that even when things do go wrong, if you're telling your story, you're inviting people on the journey on how you got there and the plan to move forward. And so rather than, I feel like in my career, I've gotten a lot of, why didn't you just ... whatever this is. And when you're telling your story, it takes them on that walk with you of, this is why I didn't just. You might not phrase it that way, but it helps answer those questions. And so people can understand, oh, I can see where this would happen. Maybe it's still a bad thing, but I can understand where that came from. And it shows that you're thinking about, oh, I know that was a bad thing, but here's how we're going to keep rolling and moving forward. Yes.
Exactly. You're modeling for everyone what the journey is like, and it's full of bumps. The path to success is never a straight line. It's a trend upwards with dips and valleys and peaks. And so I think storytelling, not just for the story part, but you're modeling for kids and the adults you work with. This is what we do. We dust ourselves off, we apologize, we repair, we keep moving forward.
So good. It takes off the pressure of perfection. This is human life. Yeah. So good. Thank you all. Well, any other final thoughts on storytelling before we close out for today?
These guys, all three of you could be Avengers.
Yes.
Not just your looks either. Like, you guys have it. You're magnetic. I love this group. Appreciate you.
I call Black Widow.
Oh.
I wasn't going to give that one to Seb.
Can I call Hawkeye?
I love Hawkeye. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Thank you for sharing your stories. I thoroughly enjoy working with these people. We always have fun and laugh a lot, but thank you all. We are Intentional Schools, and we are always game for coaching, clearly, as you can tell, and sharing our stories and hearing your stories. So we'd love to hear from you. If you want to connect, just reach on out. All right, thanks.